Audrey Snyder here, coming off of the latest installment of Penn State's Blue-White game, or I don't know, whatever we want to call it, Practice 15. It was a windy day at Beaver Stadium. Pretty decent turnout, all things considered. Obviously, Beaver Stadium's under construction. This was our first look back in here since the season ended last year. Got a little bit of chance to look at the renovation. Not as exciting as you'd hope on that front. Just a lot of construction. Certainly the west side where the press box used to be, just a big gaping hole. So that was kind of our first time seeing that. But the big news of today, and something that John Sauber and I will be back after a couple hours. John's writing right now while I record this from the Beaver Stadium. This is the recruiting lounge. We're upstairs today because, again, there's no press box in this building. But the big news, Penn State gets their latest transfer portal wide receiver. Trebor Pena from Syracuse announced his commitment about an hour and a half, 2 hours before kickoff. So again, you think about Penn State and how they went into this season saying, all right, biggest offseason needs, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Well, they've been able to shore up some of those needs, or at least fans should be, I think, a little bit more optimistic about this receiving core, because I think Devontae Ross is still going to be somebody who's going to be pretty impressive for Penn State. We had a chance to see Ross today in an extended action. Drew Allar said that he's one of their best contested catch guys, so I think that's pretty notable. But you add Pena to this group. Obviously, Kyron Hudson came in here from USC earlier this winter, so you had two guys who had a full spring with Drew Allar. But then you add Pena into that mix, and you say, all right, you got three wide receivers. See what you can do. See if you can kind of tap into that speed and his shiftiness. I still think when you look at Ross, again, his speed, what he's able to do, we saw Penn State running a lot of speed sweeps today. I feel like, again, what the point was with that, maybe just to kind of showcase what they're going to do a little bit, but we saw Liam Clifford doing that a good bit today. Maybe that's just kind of a bit of a showcase for what's to come here with this group. But again, I think, the biggest question, probably the biggest three questions Penn State fans have had about this team is the receiving core and what's different, what's better. Lyric Samuel also caught my eye today. Again, he's somebody that James Franklin has praised this spring. He's somebody who the coach said, has started to flash. We saw that today as well. So again, I think you look at Tyseer Denmark, you look at Lyric Samuel, you look at Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson, and then you add Pena into that mix. Again, it's about production. It's about seeing who steps up between now and when Penn State is back in here in Beaver Stadium, August 30th against Nevada, as James Franklin calls it. I don't know if it's Nevada or Nevada. He went with Nevada today when he mentioned it. That's the next time they will be in here. But I think, again, all things considered, you saw this receiving core make some strides. Now, is it enough? Is it going to be significantly different? Well, that's what the next few months are for, but I think that's absolutely the big development for today. Second thing that caught my eye today, something that James Franklin came out and was really adamant about after the game when he talked with the media, was the linebacking core. He pretty much laid out an opening pitch to any potential transfer portal any transfer portal linebacker, not wide receivers at this point, and said, hey, if anybody wants to come here to linebacker you, be a linebacker, Penn State has a need. Obviously, this goes back to Tamir Robinson. Penn State was not anticipating losing him in the portal. He ends up at USC. So you say, okay, what are you going to do there depth-wise? And that's the point that James Franklin made. That's what he really hit on was, okay, what do we do? We like who we have there, but what do we do when the season wears on? And what happens if you have an injury or two? We know that Penn State wants to play more of a 4-2-5. So that's kind of one way what you can eliminate some of those needs at linebacker with the 4-2-5. But still, this is a team that this now becomes, I don't want to say a glaring need, but I will definitely say a pressing need. How are you going to find a way to try and, influence this roster, bring in another linebacker? Because again, what are you going to do there? Because right now you're shorthanded because of the transfer portal. Now, before this turns into the transfer portal is terrible, it's ruining college football. Before it turns into that, I think you have to be fair and balanced and think about the other side of this. And that's Penn State was able to go out and address those needs in the receiving core this offseason because of the portal. So while you'd want to keep everyone, while James Franklin said as much today, That's not realistic. I think Penn State has done a better job than most schools at retaining players and not seeing, this crazy wave of free agency every spring and every winter in the portal. But at the end of the day, if you go into this and you say, all right, these are your biggest losses out of the portal this wave, and we're talking about Tamir Robinson, a player who I think had a really bright future here. I still think you're in a tremendously good spot. Like, I think at the end of the day, you were able to retain everybody in that running back room, which I think was massive. You were able to retain all of your quarterbacks. You were able to add to that receiving core, and really keep your playmakers intact. So again, all things considered, Penn State's got to continue to use the portal to its advantage, and now the focus shifts to linebacker. Last but not least, before I get out of here, before reconvening with Jon Sauber in a little bit to bring you guys a more in-depth rundown, I asked James Franklin about quarterback 2 and what has he seen throughout these 15 practices from the guys behind Drew Allar, notably Jackson Smolik and Ethan Grunkemeyer. As Penn State found out in seasons prior, thinking back to the Iowa game in particular, again, Penn State does go to Iowa this year, you got to have an experienced backup quarterback. And James Franklin spoke really highly of Grunkemeyer and Jackson Smolik. I thought both of those guys, they made some plays today that you say, okay, I can kind of start to see the future here. But he did say this will be, that number 2 quarterback spot will be a true camp competition. And he believes it's going to go down to the wire. So again, it's a good problem to have, and that you have 2 quarterbacks that are developing. And obviously the story with Smolik was coming back and getting healthy after that injury pretty much derailed all of last season for him. So you have that, but you also have to say, well, okay, if something would happen in a game and you're without Drew Allar for a series, 2 series, a quarter, whatever, do you feel confident with those guys behind him? And James Franklin said that whoever that number 2 quarterback is, they're going to have to make sure they get that guy reps during the season and not just in mop-up time, right? That's similar to the line Franklin said a few years ago when it was, all right, you know what you have in Sean Clifford, but what about Drew Allar, and how do you get that guy meaningful reps? Well, that's absolutely something that Penn State's going to have to keep in mind here as they inch toward the season. And Drew Allar, we spoke with him after the game, or the scrimmage, practice, whatever you want to call it. And he said, the months ahead between now and August 30th, it's critical for leadership. It's critical for development. And this is where, and James Franklin has said this countless times before too, this is where your team really starts to be built, right? Who's leading the workouts in the summer? Who's leading when they're working with the strength staff, running hills over there across the street? If you're watching on YouTube, again, I'm out looking toward the parking lot. There's people still tailgating here at about 5:30 in the evening. So again, this is going to be a really important offseason, but I do think it was nice to be back in the stadium, no doubt. It was also nice and a little bit noticeably different for me to kind of take some time walking around the stadium, chat with some fans, appreciated the kind words about the podcast, about my work, about Jon's work. It was nice to kind of put some faces with names of listeners and those types of things. But it was really interesting and exciting to kind of feel what fans are feeling about this program. I mean, I was standing down there in the tunnel as Penn State was getting ready. Again, it's the 15th practice, right? Nobody needs to be here. Fans are lined up about 7-8 deep watching Drew Allar and this team run out of the tunnel. After the game, James Franklin shaking hands with people in the tunnel club. Nick Singleton's hanging around signing autographs. There is an excitement. There is a buzz, unlike ever before that I've covered around this team, and I've been doing this since about 2010. And again, maybe this is the preseason number 1 team, right? Like there's all that excitement building, and I could feel that today. I could sense that. I'm curious to ask Jon about that in a little bit when we reconvene, if he noticed that, if he thought maybe anything was different. But I just want to hop on here real quick, chat with you guys with some quick thoughts from up here in the recruiting lounge. Again, Blue White's always a big recruiting weekend, but as it shapes up today, the big news, Penn State had Syracuse wide receiver Trebor Pena, Penn State's 3rd portal wide receiver of the offseason. So we'll kind of see. But I'll be back with Jon here in a little bit. We'll have a new podcast in your feeds by Sunday morning to kind of wrap up spring ball and look ahead to the offseason. So thanks for listening.